Hello everyone, I'm just outside of the town of Chowchilla, California, and I know that's not going to mean a lot to you, but what you are going to be interested in is knowing all the details surrounding the biggest mass kidnapping in United States history, and I'm going to argue one of the dumbest kidnappings too. Stay tuned, it is a heck of a story. I guess every parent's worst nightmare is that something happens to their children. Sickness, God forbid, death. But it's not often we contemplate the idea of kidnapping. But on July 15th, 1976, what we now have come to know as the largest mass kidnapping in United States history, and the dumbest one too, happened here outside of the Dairyland Elementary School in Chowchilla, a elementary school that was founded in 1915. Anyway, on that July 15th morning of 1976, Edward Ray, the bus driver who regularly ran the kids around, loaded up his bus with 26 children plus himself, and they headed off to the Chowchilla fairgrounds where there was a swimming pool. The kids were going to have a little bit of fun. Well, a little bit down the road here, an unbelievable thing happened. As Ray was driving down the road, and these are really some, I don't want to say really out of the way country roads here, and must have been much more so back in 1976. Little two-lane affairs with just a lot of almond trees and agriculture here. But as he was making his way down Avenue 18 and a half here towards downtown Chowchilla, a man stepped out on the road with a rifle and in the middle of the road pointed it directly at the bus. Of course, Edward Ray, being a responsible person, not knowing what's really going on and shocked by the whole scene of somebody drawing a weapon on him, stops the bus, and the masked man tells him to open the doors of the bus. He jumps on, puts the rifle to the head of Edward Ray, and says, "Drive on." In the meantime, there was another van behind the school bus now that was driven by the co-conspirator, one of the co-conspirators in the kidnapping. And, well, let's just say, what they did next was kind of unbelievable. You can imagine on that bus and in those vans, when they transferred the children and Ed Ray to the vans. They ended up driving around town for a couple hours here because, well, in my opinion, these were some kidnappers. They were not professional, and I'll get into their story in a couple minutes. But you now have a tiger by the tail. You have 26 kids at gunpoint that have been, and a driver that have been herded into vans. They end up driving around Chowchilla for a couple hours here, and finally the vans pull up to a location off the side of a road a couple miles up the way here, and they covered up and camouflaged the bus as best they could. Everybody got into the vans. I might have misspoken. They were on the bus, and at this point they were transferred into two vans and driven off to God knows where. The two brothers that committed the kidnapping were the Schoenfeld brothers, James and Richard Schoenfeld, and unbelievably they came from a rather wealthy family around here, but they were heavily in debt. I don't know who conceived the crazy notion to kidnapping on such a massive scale would work, but their idea was to get $5 million of ransom money and life would be good, right? They drove off to the town of Livermore up in the East Bay of California, in the Bay Area there, where they had, with a friend of theirs, a co-conspirator, had a like a salvage yard or big property. They ended up digging out a pit and actually putting a truck body in there, a container body of a truck in there, and buried it actually below ground, so it was like a subterranean room, right? Maybe 40 feet by about 10 feet wide. All of the children and the driver were hustled into that container, which was buried under the ground. Like I said, you couldn't see it from above, and I guess they were expected to live down there. There were some provisions for food. I think there were a few mattresses and things like that. But this is really a kooky, wild story, isn't it? Well, here's where things really went off the rail, as if things aren't crazy enough in this story. The Schoenfeld brothers are here attempting to call in and demand to the police to demand the ransom. But the lines to the police station are all tied up because all the media in the world is getting this sensational story that 26 children and a bus driver are missing. God, what has become of them? You can imagine. It's looking like the largest mass kidnapping in the United States history. Well, the brothers must have been freaking out because now they, as I said, they got a tiger by the tail. They got 26 kids and a driver here. They're now got these this group underground in a container, a truck container that's been buried in the East Bay of the Bay Area. They can't even get through to put their ransom demands in. Unreal. Once the Schoenfeld brothers had left the area there, the people inside, the kids and Ed Ray, got real busy inside of the container. They managed to stack the mattresses, and they were able to see that the entrance, they could feel that they could move it a little bit, but they were able over time to like take a piece of wood or something and pry it open enough that they could slide two huge industrial batteries that were holding the door shut, the entrance to it shut. And after about 14 hours of really hard effort on the part of bus driver Ed Ray and the oldest boy, 14-year-old Michael Marshall, they were able to free themselves from their entombment underground. Well, the night watchman at the, I don't know if you call it a landfill or waste depot owned by the family of one of the co-conspirators. You can imagine when he sees these people on his rounds start to emerge from underground, an unbelievable scene unfolding right in front of him. It's actually a quarry owned by a family, and once the night watchman there saw them emerge and reported it, suspicion immediately fell on the son of the quarry owner, because he was one of the few that had the keys to any excavation equipment and to be able to dig out a trench big enough to hold a container. Just imagine what's going through these guys' minds as this thing starts to come a cropper here and the news comes out and they're not able to put their ransom demand in, and all of a sudden I'm sure they realize two things. Number one, we're probably the dumbest kidnappers in the world. And number two is, gee, I wonder if everybody survived. It could be a felony homicide here if somebody dies in there. So a lot on their mind for sure. Police executed a search warrant for Woods. How they found rifles and things. And by this time, the kidnappers and Woods had fled. Woods ended up running up to Vancouver. After a couple days of seeing news reports, one of the brothers turned himself in and the other one was captured. Quite a story. Luckily, no one was killed or injured. The brothers, the conspirators, were sentenced to life with possibility of parole. Lucky for them, there were no serious injuries or death. And they were all eventually paroled and are living in society now. Back in the back though, you saw where the bus was parked. It's called the Ed Ray Bus Center, and they actually have an Ed Ray Day here in Chowchilla to celebrate, well, a bus driver who went above and beyond the call of duty, and with his cool action and planning and thought, were able to escape a really, really horrendous situation. Well, now you know the story of the largest mass kidnapping in the United States history, and also, I would argue, one of the dumbest. To think about committing a crime on such a scale defies the imagination because of the logistics and the amount of manpower that would be put on the case from the FBI down, especially where children are involved, in massive numbers of children. It was just an ill-conceived, ham-fisted, stupid project from the get-go. And well, they paid the price. I think 70 years old, one of the brothers got out. I'm not quite sure the fate of the others, but I think that they're all out of prison now. But Ed Ray, as I said, the bus driver, is a real hero here. You won't see any placards or marks on the Dairyland School here. It's not something they're proud to shout about, this history. But it occurred in 1976, and it set the standard for a crime on a massive scale that, well, I hope is never repeated again. I want to thank you for being on this journey with me. True crime in America, the largest and most ill-conceived mass kidnapping in United States history, the Chowchilla kidnapping here in the Central Valley. Things do go on here occasionally, as the Dairyland School incident shows. I'm going to close out my video here. Let's have a little bit of a look around Chowchilla. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please take a second, hit the subscribe button, the bell for all notifications. This is the type of real life, real travel I like to do, with real stories of real working areas, men and women. The stories, the stories, the stories. Finally, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you enjoyed the story, please share it out on your social media. It's likely your contacts would appreciate hearing about it too. Thanks so much, everybody. Thumbs up are appreciated.